From under the Golden Dome in Charleston, this is the West Virginia Capitol Report.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Capitol Report. I'm Bill Laird along with co-host Dave Perry, and we have a very interesting and timely program lined out for you today. Several guests we'll be talking to. A lot of concern about the impact and effect of the COVID-19 pandemic as it sweeps across the nation and brought many changes in the way in which we live, and we'll be touching on that subject with some of our guests here today. But we're very pleased to start off with a gentleman, David, that we've both known for quite some time, a former and very distinguished member of the West Virginia House of Delegates, where he served as chairman of the House Agriculture Committee, then moved on to the state Senate representing the citizens of the 13th Senatorial District, which includes Monongalia County. But again, a gentleman who has quite a public service record, and currently seeking the Democrat nomination for election to the office of Commissioner of Agriculture for the state of West Virginia, the Honorable Bob Beach. And Bob, welcome to the Capitol Report Show.
It's great to be back.
Again, you know, the world changes. You blink your eye. I think any person seeking to run in a statewide election back when we filed in January, little thought given concerning you know, the possibility of a pandemic, a major disruptive influence, I'm sure, in the basis of your campaign going in. If you could, just for a minute, maybe explain what kind of adjustments you've had to make in light of, you know, new standards such as social distancing, the prohibitions against mass gatherings, no longer a press the flesh kind of campaign, and I know that's what we were all used to.
And I think, as we all know, as candidates for office at one time or another, pressing the flesh and being out there in the public is one of the things we always enjoy. Now it's basically at home and working a social media campaign. If you can afford the mailings or the phone calls all the time, obviously you go down that avenue. For us, we're just now getting signs out in the community, and that's the two main components we're working with right now is social media. But you know, we've been dealt a deck of cards here, a hand that's different than we've ever had to play in the past. So we're trying to explore different avenues. And we talked earlier off the air, you know, social media is a big thing. You know, in 2011, the last numbers I could find, saturation of social media was 44% just here in the state of West Virginia.
Yeah.
And it's probably up in the 70s and 80s by now.
Absolutely.
It's a huge number.
So again, your shift in getting your message out, reliance on social media in addition to other forms of electronic communication.
Electronic communication, like you guys right here today with the Capitol Report. We're doing some radio interviews in southern West Virginia next week. So trying to make those connections with the public again. But for the most part, it's social media, and it's a very effective tool. And what's nice about that, you can track the effectiveness.
Absolutely.
The numbers are there for you to review.
Yep.
Bob, as Senator Laird said, of course, you were chairman of the Agriculture Committee on the House side. So you have a very strong background in agriculture with yourself and your dad, and the history with the Education Committee as well.
That's right.
But as you view agriculture in the state, how do you feel the pandemic has impacted it?
In the state, it's directly linked into what's going on nationally. And we've seen this pandemic expose the weaker part of our infrastructure in regards to transportation of fruits and vegetables, commodities in regards to fresh meats. And it's exposed it in a way that we weren't expecting. You know, most of our slaughterhouses are located in Iowa. Most of the feedlots are along the Mississippi corridor, closer to your grain sources, and the produce for the most part that's truly seasonal, that's grown year-round, so to speak, is from Florida to California. So there's a disconnect between what's happening in the population centers of the east and to some degree of the northwest. So West Virginia has an opportunity, if we plan, to take advantage and plan for more regionalized growth in meat supply and produce supply. But there's a couple hurdles along the way that we can get into that West Virginia has to overcome before we can be a player and provide the big box stores, the Krogers, the Walmarts, with the foods they need to sell.
You know, again, I think that's an important point, sort of the supply chain. What we've seen, I guess, are weaknesses resulting from centralization. I mean, these are huge processing plants. Is part of the takeaway from this that maybe we need to, try to support sort of the growing by local movements where, we can have much smaller local, produce and ways in which we can aggregate, local agricultural products to meet local demands?
Oh, well, you're exactly right, because there is a disconnect. And as both of you know, having been around the legislature, that grow local and that food market mentality or farmers market mentality has grown and taken off in the last 20 years. And we have seen it to be an effective tool for helping our local farmers. We need to basically capitalize on that, to take advantage of what's going on there, the interest in what's going on there in your district or soon to be district. Yeah. And I don't know what district number it is, I apologize. But you have a farm there who's doing wonderful work right now because they were ready, they were prepared. And that's the folks that will be able to take advantage of that, those ones who are in that business and can expand their operations. And I think that's what the Department of Agriculture has to do. We have to be able to help them along the way and give them the tools they need to expand. But the whole network and a transportation issue is a problem for us, because here we have failing farms in the West. And I say failing only because they're having to destroy the crops because there's not that need for their product right now, because a lot of that stuff is still sitting on the shelves in warehouses because it's institutionally packed and can't be used anywhere else, really. So we need to get it closer to our home, get it closer to the center of population on the East Coast to take advantage of it. And that's not unique. Let me tell you, and you're a historian, so let me just say this. We know that that problem existed during the Great Depression. Yep. We know that food was available during the Great Depression, but it was all across the South. Yep. It wasn't getting north to the population centers. So we should learn on that. We should learn from that problem, right, and be ready for it the next time. And hopefully we can capitalize on those mistakes that are going on right now.
You bet. You bet.
Senator, to correct the problem, it's like a lot of politicians. They identify the problem.
Me now.
Not you, I'm sorry. A lot of politicians identify the problem without ever having a solution. Yeah. What would be your solution to these problems or issues?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because we were already in communications with entities and individuals in the state of West Virginia. We lack processing here in the state of West Virginia. For many years we used to be number one, but we had a processing facility in the state. The one we have now is outside the state that everybody uses. And you'll see apples coming from the Monroe-Greenbrier area moving up the highways into Virginia to take them for processing. We need to get those facilities back into West Virginia for produce and start marketing a good that can go into Walmart, whether it be an apple juice or whatever it may be, a jam and jelly, whatever it may be. Start processing it local. Same way with meat. Right now in the state of West Virginia, we have very few slaughterhouses that have the ability to have a USDA stamped inspection sticker on it. In the Eastern Panhandle, they have to take everything outside the state to have that USDA stamp. We can't move pork, beef, chicken, lamb. We can't move that outside the state without that inspection sticker. So we need to work on a way and focus on a way of getting those plants regionally located so farmers can take advantage of them and get that USDA sticker applied, and then we move forward from there.
Sounds very reasonable.
Again, speaking of the USDA and inspections and those types of things, and maybe you could enlighten me and our viewers a little bit about the duties and responsibilities of the Agriculture Commissioner as it may relate to food safety.
Yeah.
I think folks are concerned about what they bring into their house during the pandemic, and but again, that's I think bioterrorism. A lot of things at one point led people to sort of pivot and look at how do we have food safety in this country. Maybe you could explain to us a little bit about the role of the Agriculture Commission.
Yeah, well, let me address the one thing you mentioned there, biosafety, biohazards.
Yeah.
If you remember 10 years ago, we had a scare across the United States, the white powder scare that was popping up all over the place.
Right.
The Department of Agriculture played that role here in the state of West Virginia of testing those samples. Mm-hmm. And they do still to this day work with the federal government testing samples to make sure it's a go or no-go scenario. There's a lot of departments in it. Food safety is key. That is really the principal role the Department of Agriculture plays. Going into the grocery stores, making sure everything's safe, temperature's correct. Dave here's an old grocery guy as well. He understands that these guys can pop in at any time, take samples of meat, samples of produce, multiple temperatures, checking for sanitation across the facility. The bigger role here, I think we as a country have to look at is what's happening at the national level with our federal inspectors. Just recently, 148 of these guys was diagnosed, 160 of these guys were diagnosed with COVID. We've had 20 deaths within the inspectors realm. There's over 6,000 inspectors nationwide.
Wow.
Excuse me, there's 7,000. 6,000 of those guys are more or less quarantined right now. So we also don't have we have a transportation issue. We also have an inspection issue. We can open up all these facilities, but if we don't have an inspector inside to give it the stamp of approval, that beef's just going to hang there.
Right, absolutely. Well, again, our time is running out, but again, recognizing it's tough, under normal circumstances to try to get your message out, but boy, this pandemic is greatly complicated. But wanted to give you just a minute or two to just sort of look in the camera and tell folks, what you have in mind as being our new agriculture commissioner in the state of West Virginia, and why people need to look to you for leadership and direction in that important department.
Well, I appreciate that. I also want to go back to something you originally said. You pronounced the name Monongalia correctly, and I greatly appreciate that.
Well.
And the people of Monongalia greatly appreciate that, because it's awfully misunderstood and often mispronounced. Folks, no, I greatly appreciate Dave and Bill having me here today. West Virginia Agriculture has an opportunity right now to build economic development here in the state of West Virginia, and that's been my goal all along, is to increase viability for the farmers and the agriculture community as a whole. We already have a plan in place, and I hope you'll visit with beach4westvirginia.com. It's beach4wv.com. We lay out a small plan there, what we intend to do, what our focuses will be in regards to communication and education issues also, and food safety, as we mentioned here. But there's a plan in place. There's 53 years of experience I'm bringing to the table, from the farm to the State House, and I think it'll benefit West Virginia greatly once we put a team together that can help the entire ag community. It's an opportunity that, again, it's going to create jobs and just build West Virginia. We take pride in our tourism. I want to build pride and excitement both in agriculture here in the state of West Virginia.
Well said, my friend.
Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you.
Again, Bob Beach, Democrat candidate for election to the Office of Agriculture Commissioner for the state of West Virginia, joining us here today on the Capitol Report. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break, and Dave and I will be right back, so stay with us, everybody.
Stay tuned. The West Virginia Capitol Report will be right back. The West Virginia Capitol Report is brought to you by the AFL-CIO of West Virginia, Cucumber & Company, online at cucumberandcompany.com, and Mark Hunt & Associates, toll free at 800-554-1280. From under the Golden Dome in Charleston, this is the West Virginia Capitol Report.
Welcome back to the Capitol Report as we continue our discussion with the Democrat candidate for election to the Office of Agriculture Commissioner for the state of West Virginia, the Honorable Bob Beach. And David, you have a question, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Beach, you were in the House Education Committee and you're in the Senate Education Committee. And at that time you had a great deal of focus on education, and you still have that focus. As the Agriculture Commissioner, do you think we should expand educational opportunity, and if so, how?
I do, and it's two-phase. It's one, public ed, and it's higher ed both. As you know, and are aware, well, actually both of you are aware, we have a school building authority here in the state of West Virginia. One of the things I'd like us to focus on, and I get this question all the time, especially from this region for some reason, and it's probably because of all the new facilities, folks wanting funding for greenhouses to be attached to the schools. I think it's an excellent idea. I would like the school building authority to take on that role, and I would like to see a piece of legislation passed next year making that a mandate within the school building authority when a new facility is built, regardless of the size, that a greenhouse be attached, whether it be grade school, middle school, or high school. Obviously, the need would be smaller in a high school, in a grade school, and you wouldn't have to go as large. But as you move up the chain, it would be larger as the school gets bigger. And it allows on the high school end, if it's a large enough facility, you can get into hydroponics and all things. And that's the future. Well, it's the present. For present day, as far as the growth in greens, microgreens, and things like that. Those are all hydroponics. And I think it's an opportunity to expand the horizons of ag students here in the state of West Virginia, and biology students as well. I don't think you have to isolate that just to ag students, but the entire school who may have a program that they want to implement some type of crop there.
So you're talking about a seamless curriculum or a seamless program in all the programmatic levels.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think if you teach a child in grade school how to plant a bean in a certain size container and just allow them to nurture that plant through the process, take it home at the end of the school year, it does something for a student to see something that they've grown on their own. And then there's also experiments that you can do when you get into middle school that requires that type of setting. And then high school, having gone through FFA myself and VOAG, there's an opportunity to really expand the knowledge of a student there. Then it goes into a seamless transition also into a 2-year. And that's where I want to focus, is on 2-year education and ag programs. We do have one community college, I believe it's Eastern Community College, who's doing some small programs right now. But I think we could do something in regards to marrying a small ag class situation, ag classroom situation, along with a business degree, and help these guys get off the ground and developing their own agricultural programs. And we could do it in a lot of ways. It could be maybe strictly focused on apples. Maybe it's beef production. Maybe it's just a retail establishment selling ag products locally. But I think education is key to developing agriculture in the state of West Virginia and economic development.
You know, Bob, again, that's interesting, and you mentioned Future Farmers of America, and I can think of things like, 4-H, things like county fairs. Part of the culture of West Virginia is tied to agriculture, and is it fair to say that, a lot of times you have multi-generational farm families where the actual transfer of knowledge in terms of agriculture is handed down from grandfather to father to son to grandson, and I guess the potential of ever losing that as part of our culture in West Virginia is there's some real consequences to that. And from your perspective as a candidate for agriculture commissioner and your many years of work, can small family farms, mountaintop farms around the state of West Virginia, will these be surviving 50 or 100 years into the future?
I'm glad you asked that, because that's a problem we have here in the state of West Virginia right now. Just in the past 3 years, we've lost over 720 small farms.
Wow.
That's a big number. That's a huge hit. And I suspect if you really played with the number, you'd probably find that's probably the largest loss of any of the states around us. Yeah. So we do have to focus on it. But going back to your original part of your question, you mentioned the county fairs and 4-H, and that's part of our platform. Who better to tell the ag story than those folks in agriculture? That's right. Whether it be agritourism or those guys working greenhouses, who's better to tell that story? Those people on the front line. The county fairs. Yeah. We're worried about county fairs this year because of the pandemic, obviously. Right. Some of these may not happen, depending on how things go. If we see the pandemic picking up again, I guarantee you we'll lose several of those festivals across the state of West Virginia. And I suspect people watching very closely what's going to happen with the state fair. Yeah. And that's your district, soon will be. And that'll be a big hit for your community economically. Because both of us know as well, all three of us know as well, is that folks don't really want to fund fairs and festivals. Right. They really don't. They really don't. But we all know that that's an economic driver for that community. And there's a lot of benefits, huge amount of benefits. But again, that's part of our platform. We believe that we need to be able to tell that farmer's story and build on agriculture from there, because there's a lot going on and a lot more we can do.
Right, absolutely. And I guess once those are gone, whether it's development for real estate potential on larger tracts of land, once those are gone, you can't put it back together again.
I'm glad you said that, because just in your district in Monroe County, you lost one of the largest apple farms in the state of West Virginia. And we lost another one up in the Eastern Panhandle. And it came by surprise. Those things should not happen. Those 720 some farms we lost, that should not have been a surprise to anyone. And that's one of the things we want to focus on inside the Department of Agriculture, is open up that line of communication to those small farms. Are you needing assistance here? Are you struggling here? Right. We want them to be able to react to our people to be able to react to a phone call or an email in a prescribed time. I will give credit to Senator Manchin. I've learned a lot from his staff, as a matter of fact, and how he addresses phone calls coming into the office and the time frame that those folks have to get a response back to them. Yeah. It's like that. Yeah. And that's the way I intend to run the Department of Agriculture.
That's important.
Instant response. Communication's everything.
You bet.
Bob, as you take this position over, elected to it, What challenges do you see the departments facing, particularly in what the new norm may be?
Yeah, the new norm has changed. The old norm has changed. It is the new norm. What we're going to have to be faced with, and again, you guys are familiar with this, it's the budget. We already are scared what's going to happen with this current fiscal year, which doesn't end until June 1, right? Or June 30th, excuse me.
Right.
And then we're going into the fiscal year where we've already passed the budget. Well, that's pretty much going to go out the window. So I suspect we'll have a governor here sometime soon ask us for budget cuts in those agencies. So we're going to have to start keeping an eyeball on the budget of the Department of Agriculture. And we're going to have to be aware, whoever the next governor is, agriculture is a priority. Because we can build on that. We know that we can build on that right now. The numbers are out there to justify saving that budget or even adding more to it and finding someplace else to make cuts if necessary. But there's avenues, grants, and I do not intend to run my department on grants as the current department's doing. There's grants coming in all the time, and it's simply so they can draw down that 27% to backfill their budget and apply the job to somebody that's already in the building. That's why they're drawing these grants down. Any grants, I want them to affect the farmer. I want it to affect them in a positive way that they can take advantage of it.
Out there at the grassroots.
At the grassroots is absolutely right. No pun intended. You should have said it the corn roots.
Bob, over the years I've heard people talk about maybe there's some potential for agricultural use of post-mine properties, that have been cleared, and the typography. We were pretty good at one time at rearranging the typography of the state to sort of flatten things out. Do you see that as part of the equation going forward, particularly in southern West Virginia, where we don't have the rich bottom land that you find perhaps along the Ohio River Basin or in certain other areas in the state?
Yeah. I think the big question is that soil suitable for something?
Yeah.
It all really depends on how they backfilled it. Did they push topsoil aside with the intention of backfilling topsoil the way it was originally? Growing up as a kid, we lived in a neighborhood, beautiful farmland, but there was a former strip job through there that had been reclaimed. Well, you couldn't grow anything on it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just absolutely horrible. It was just rocky, subsoil. Who knows what happens to the topsoil? It was probably buried under rather than done properly. So you have that problem. Then you have all the red tape you have to go through in regards to the feds and what they require of you, liability insurance and all those things. There are very few things that are certain to be able to grow on that. One is hemp, and I'm a big promoter of hemp products. There's been some experimentation with lavender and different things like that. It's really going to find a mix, because you as a farmer are not going to be able to go back in there and be able to afford the expense of amending that soil so it's going to grow something like a corn or a strawberry or something like that. But you could go in there and set up rows and rows of hothouses, high tunnels, greenhouses, and bring the soil in and amend the soil within those facilities.
Right.
And you really could go to town there. So,
yeah,
there's an opportunity there. I don't think we ignore it, but we're going to have some serious conversation on what's needed to do to make that happen.
Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, our time has expired, but really want to wish you the very best of luck as you try to get your message out to the citizens of West Virginia. Again, sounds to me like you've made the proper adjustments to your campaign, and you're working hard every day. So I hope you fare well.
Well, thank you, Bill. Dave, I thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Okay. Again, joined today here on the Capitol Report by Senator Bob Beach, who is a candidate for election to the office of Agriculture Commissioner of the state of West Virginia. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and Dave and I will be back to close things out. So stay with us, everybody.
Stay tuned. The West Virginia Capitol Report will be right back. The West Virginia Capitol Report is brought to you by the AFL-CIO of West Virginia, Cucumber & Company, online at cucumberandcompany.com, and Mark Hunt & Associates, toll free at 800-554-1280. From under the Golden Dome in Charleston, this is the West Virginia Capitol Report.
Welcome back to the Capitol Report Show as we close out today's program, and again the opportunity to talk to Senator Bob Beach, who's currently a Democrat candidate for election to the office of Agriculture Commissioner of the state of West Virginia. And Dave Perry, again, Bob Beach, a fellow we've both known for quite some time, always had a knack for social media. I think I sense he's still able to get his message out even if he can't get out.
Absolutely, and of course he had some exciting new ideas for the commission.
And again, things are changing in the world, and I'm sure the Department of Agriculture needs to keep pace with those changes. That's going to do it for today's program. Again, on behalf of co-host Dave Perry, I'm Bill Laird. Thanks for tuning us in. Have a good week, and goodbye, everybody.
The West Virginia Capitol Report is brought to you by the AFL-CIO of West Virginia, Cucumber and Company, online at cucumberandcompany.com, and Mark Hunt and Associates, toll free at 800-554-1280. This has been the West Virginia Capitol Report.